differently.
Wish is the 62nd installment in the Disney animated canon. It was created not only to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company, but also to mark the return of the classic Disney fairy tale. Wish was shouldering the vaunted legacy of Disney animation, a history of storytelling that may very well be unmatched in American pop culture. Apart from Encanto, Disney's last few animated features have left something to be desired. Combine this with the fact that 2023 was by far Disney's most challenging year financially in quite some time, and Wish appeared to be exactly what Disney needed. Originally planned to be a traditionally animated film, Wish promised to deliver what Disney fans have been clamoring for years. Hand-drawn 2D animation, a real Disney villain, a story of good and evil, and a Renaissance-style Broadway musical format. However, early on in development, Disney realized they no longer had the infrastructure to support an animated film in the vein of Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, or even Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So they ultimately decided on a compromise that would combine traditional 2D watercolor background paintings with cutting-edge CG animation. However, the only problem with this is that in an effort to highlight the artist's hand, Disney elected to remove a crucial effect from the CG animation, which is a simple motion blur. And Wish immediately came under fire for its cheap-looking animation after the release of its very first trailer. The problem lies simply in the motion blur effect, because the idea of combining 2D backgrounds with CG character work is not an inherently bad idea. Disney's original plan was to create a moving 3D painting, which, had it worked, I think we would be having a very different discussion right now. But because they chose to eliminate the motion blur, it results in a style of movement that is traditionally associated with cheaper-looking animation made for television. Wish was met with a tepid response from critics and fans alike, the most common criticisms being the animation, King Magnifico not being nearly villainous enough, and stilted and verbose songwriting. Despite all of the backlash and discourse surrounding Disney's latest animated film, I think Wish serves as a perfect microcosm for all of Disney's problems in 2024. To be perfectly candid, Disney is losing its magic. I'm sure a lot of people would consider me to be a Disney superfan, and in many ways, I am. No, I didn't cry when the parks reopened after the pandemic, and I don't blindly praise everything they do without any semblance of criticism, but I love movies, storytelling, and animation. Historically, who has done this better, or at least more famously, than Disney? It's kind of hard to think of an answer, right? I think the history of Disney, both the man and the company, their movies and the theme parks, is genuinely fascinating. I also don't think there's anything wrong with having respect and admiration for Disney productions from the Golden and Silver Age, along with the Disney Renaissance when I and many others were growing up. Disney changed animation and storytelling forever. It's not hard to remember a time when Disney held a place in the cultural zeitgeist that was nostalgic and elegant and dreamlike. But something has changed. While the business side of Disney's decline is left to sharper minds than mine, for the sake of establishing a semi-concrete timeline here, I think trouble really started brewing for Disney in 2018. This was the year that the problem of sequels, remakes, and pre-existing IP revealed itself, specifically with the release of Ralph Breaks the Internet. Ralph Breaks the Internet rubbed a lot of Disney fans the wrong way for many reasons, the biggest of which being that it was a sequel to a beloved, original, fun, and fresh animated movie, but rather than tell a story worthy of the Wreck-It Ralph name, Ralph Breaks the Internet was clearly more interested in being an advertisement for all of the intellectual property that Disney owned. Look at all of the stuff. Isn't it cool we can have Iron Man, Buzz Lightyear, the Disney princesses, and stormtroopers all in the same movie? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that cool, guys? Don't you want more? Consume product. Problems of remakes and sequels only persisted in 2019 with the release of Disney classics, live-action Aladdin, live-action The Lion King, Frozen 2, and Toy Story 4. However, the problem was effectively masked because at the time these movies were still making a lot of money, but 2019 was also the peak of Marvel's popularity, so it didn't really seem to matter. That said, it was very clear that Disney was not prioritizing original stories. Everything they had in their production pipeline relied on their built-in fandom. The problem ballooned in 2020 when Bob Iger retired, and the company was forced to pivot to streaming a lot sooner than they had anticipated. I've already discussed the Succession disaster at length, but suffice it to say the 1-2 punch of Bob Iger's retirement and the COVID-19 pandemic all but pigeonholed Disney. Bob Chapek had two major objectives as the new CEO of the Walt Disney Company in 2020. Go all in on streaming and win the culture war. We'll get to that, unfortunately. Disney Plus had been in development since 2017 because streaming was seen as the next big profit generator. Every major studio was creating their own streaming service. It was only natural that Disney would follow suit. When the pandemic occurred, Disney correctly assumed that it would affect their profits from theatrical releases. The company's response to this was to change course and instruct every department to pour their resources into Disney Plus. And initially, this strategy was a success. Disney Plus reached major subscriber milestones a lot sooner than their competitors, since everybody was stuck at home and nobody was going to the theater. People needed things to watch, and Disney had a built-in library that had a greater appeal to children and families. Be that as it may, Disney's strategy would come back to haunt them, because when major pandemic restrictions were lifted, they only doubled down on streaming. It's well-worn territory at this point, but Disney denied theatrical releases for a lot of their movies and opted to send them straight to Disney Plus following 2020. They were too insistent on flooding Disney Plus with as much material as possible in order to win the streaming wars. They prioritized that short-term gain a little too much. Disney's releases between 2020 and 2022 were fairly hit or miss. Raya and the Last Dragon disappointed audiences, while genuinely great films like Soul and Luca were denied a theatrical release. Consequently, these movies did not become cultural touchstones the way previous Pixar releases had. Disney's streaming strategy may have been a bad choice in retrospect, but it's one that's easily rectifiable now that movie theaters are once again a viable form of distribution. Sadly, a second major problem arose for Disney in 2020. That is, of course, the criticism of woke Disney. I'm not going to delve too deep into this topic, as Lindsay Ellis has already made far and away the best video about this topic. She also had the wherewithal to identify this issue before it became a real problem for Disney. Historically, Disney is a company that is trying to appeal to the most amount of people possible in order to make the most amount of money possible. Therefore, it has always been in their best interest to remain apolitical, which for the most part they have. Disney has been releasing mainstream media since the 1930s. Naturally, the representation in said media is going to evolve over time as the world changes. This phenomenon isn't exclusive to Disney, it just so happens to be most easily identifiable in Disney due to the sheer amount of property that they own. Disney's first Black Princess came in 2009. Was there backlash over this? Yes. But the detractors were seen as a vocal minority, and The Princess and the Frog was a critical and financial success. However, the increasing and unbelievably toxic political divide in the United States since 2016 has led to extensive backlash against woke Disney. The level-headed response to Disney's creative decisions involving representation would be something along the lines of, oh, Disney is clearly trying to make their creative output more diverse to appeal to more audiences. That is not the response we're seeing, though. Because the quality of Disney productions has decreased so precipitously in recent years, many people erroneously believe that is the sole reason for Disney's decline, their decision to make movies that are more inclusive. The entire idea of Disney's politics requires a nuanced discussion, and that's one that I'm not entirely comfortable having. That said, I will acknowledge that there are reasons to believe Disney's sudden endorsement of progressive ideology is disingenuous, to say the least. Again, I refer you to Lindsay's video, but this is such a delicate conversation, and that's just not my area of expertise. If you want to talk about movies that have a bunch of science in them, a bunch of medicine in them, then yeah, I can talk to you for 3 hours straight. But when it comes to the politics, that's better left to somebody else. Disney has a lot of problems right now, and the reality is I've barely scratched the surface in this series. Declining revenue for new films, an evolving media landscape that prioritizes at-home streaming, the costs for trips to the parks are completely skyrocketing, and ideological battles that threaten to tarnish its reputation as family-friendly and politically neutral. Only this March did Bob Iger and the Disney board manage to stave off a hostile takeover from activist investor Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo, who is a former Disney executive. It seems as if Disney is struggling to figure out where the future of entertainment is going. They're learning how to bridge the divide between the cable network era and the streaming era. In the present day, it's hard to engage with mainstream pop culture without running into something that isn't owned or at least co-produced by Disney. As a result, the Disney brand is actually being diluted. 20 years ago, if you were to ask somebody what Disney is known for, they would say theme parks and animation. What is the answer now? It's Marvel, it's Star Wars, it's animation, it's live action, it's everything. Everything isn't an identity. Disney used to live and die by its animation studio. Unfortunately, the company isn't likely to prioritize brand identity over increased revenue streams for shareholders. I won't pretend to know what the answer is, but Disney better figure it out, because the magic is fading, and it is fading fast. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope that you all enjoyed this series. Truthfully, this is something that could go on hypothetically for the end of time, because there are always updates regarding Disney's business and creative decisions. So trust me, it's something I've thought about, but I'm going to end it here. And while I was writing this episode, it occurred to me that I never covered Wish if you would like to see a review for that, just let me know if that is something that you think you would be interested in, and I will go ahead and make that video, because it shouldn't take me very long at all. Otherwise, I would just like to once again thank you for watching. Like the video, comment, and let me know your thoughts. Why do you think Disney is struggling? Because I do think this is a very interesting discussion that invites multiple perspectives. Truth is, I don't really think there's a simple or a single answer for what Disney is going through right now. So I open the floor to discussion here. Please let me know what you think. And truthfully, given Disney's history, I really wouldn't be all that surprised if in, say, 2 to 3 years, Disney is fine. Because I think what we have seen with the Disney Dark Age and then the post-Renaissance era is, for every period of time where Disney seems to really struggle, both financially and creatively, things always kind of come back around and they experience a period of incredible success, both financially and creatively. So I really wouldn't be surprised if in a couple years I'm sitting here and we're talking about a new Disney animated feature, and the discussion around this movie seems to be, wait a minute, this movie was pretty good. Is it a Disney classic? After all, that is what happened with